It wasn't thunder that broke the silence in St. Gabriel's Cathedral that morning. It was a bark. A single sharp, defiant bark that refused to be ignored. The mourners turned, slowly at first, heads lifting from bowed prayer, eyes scanning the pews in confusion. Another bark, louder now. And then the sound of claws scraping wood, frantic, sharp, echoing through the vast stone sanctuary like fingernails on a coffin lid. At the front of the cathedral, where the late Colonel Matthew Rourke lay in state, an aging German shepherd named Bruno had broken from his handler's grip. He lunged at the mahogany casket, barking, whining, scratching, tearing at the American flag, draped carefully across the lid. "Somebody get that damn dog, snap!" Captain Frank Maddox, his voice a low hiss of embarrassment and irritation. "He's disrupting the service." But Bruno wouldn't stop, wouldn't move, wouldn't let go. Detective Cole Jennings, standing in the back row in full-dress blues, felt something deep in his gut twist. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't grief. It was something else entirely. Something was wrong. 2 hours earlier, the skies over Boston had opened up sheets of cold September rain, washing the city clean in a way that never quite reached the soul. The kind of rain that smelled like memories. The kind that felt like endings. Cole had seen a lot of funerals in his 18 years on the force. Too many, but none had hollowed him out like this one. Colonel Matthew Rourke wasn't just a superior officer. He wasn't just the man who'd cleaned up organized crime in East Boston. He was the reason Cole was still standing. 3 years ago, Cole had lost his partner in a drug raid gone sideways. Lost himself in a bottle not long after. It was Rourke who had yanked him back out. "You're better than this, son," he'd said. "The badge still means something, and so do you." Now he was gone. At least, that's what everyone believed. Bruno had been with the colonel through it all. The shootouts, the stakeouts, the long nights in patrol cars chasing ghosts through the harbor district. They weren't just partners, they were family. And when Bruno retired 2 years ago, he didn't go to a shelter. He went home, with Rourke, to a quiet house in Brookline where the walls were covered with medals, plaques, and one weathered chew toy that Bruno refused to let anyone touch. At 10 years old, Bruno had arthritis in his hips and a sprinkle of gray on his muzzle. But there was still fire in his eyes. And this morning, that fire had become a storm. When the hearse arrived at the cathedral, Bruno had refused to ride separately. He forced himself into the back with the casket pressing his body against it the whole ride. Elaine Rourke, the colonel's widow, had tried to calm him. "He hasn't eaten in 2 days, she whispered to Cole when he arrived. "Hasn't slept either. Just keeps pacing and crying." Cole bent down to pet the dog. "He's grieving," he murmured. But Bruno didn't look sad. He looked urgent. The service began with hymns, the kind that echo forever. Rourke's flag-draped coffin sat beneath the cathedral's ancient stained glass windows, golden light refracting across the polished wood like fire. Captain Maddox gave the first eulogy, said all the right words. Hero, mentor, a good man. Cole watched him closely, too closely. Maddox and Rourke had worked side by side for over 15 years in the organized crime unit. Poker nights, BBQs, holidays. And yet not once did Maddox look directly at the coffin as he spoke. He just kept glancing at Bruno, who hadn't stopped staring back. Midway through the service, Bruno snapped his leash and made his move. The moment he lunged, chaos erupted. Gasps, shouts, the honor guard stepping forward in confusion. Bruno's claws shredded the satin beneath the flag. His muzzle dove at the coffin seam, barking so violently, Cole swore it sounded like a scream. And in that instant, in that deafening, heart-stopping instant, Cole saw it. Bruno wasn't mourning. He was warning. "Let him finish," Cole said suddenly. Captain Maddox turned on him. "What?" "Let him finish." Detective, stand down. But Elaine Rourke had already risen from the front pew, her face pale, eyes wide. "No," she said quietly. "Bruno's trying to tell us something." Maddox looked from her to Cole, his jaw clenched. "This is insane. The man's dead." "Then you won't mind if we open the casket," Cole replied. A hush fell. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. I want to see," Elaine said, trembling. "Please, if you're just as hooked as we are by Bruno's strange behavior, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Heroes for Animals, where we bring you the most extraordinary true stories of loyalty, bravery, and the animals who change everything." The honor guard stepped back. 2 funeral directors approached slowly, carefully. With white gloves and hesitant hands, they unlatched the brass clasps and gently lifted the lid. And then everything changed. At first it looked the same. Colonel Matthew Rourke in full dress uniform, hands folded, chest still, eyes closed. But Bruno's bark dropped to a whine and his head lowered toward the colonel's chest. Cole stepped forward, slowly, fighting a memory. Something Rourke had said a week earlier during a quiet conversation in his office. There's something big going down, Cole, something dirty. If anything happens to me, don't assume it was just fate. Cole reached the casket. He pressed 2 fingers to the colonel's wrist. Nothing, then lower, against the neck. A trick he'd learned from EMTs. Nothing, then a whisper, a flicker, a single beat. Oh my God, Cole breathed. He's alive. The next 30 seconds were chaos. Elaine screamed. Someone called 911. Bruno began barking again, not out of distress, but joy. Paramedics arrived in under 4 minutes. Rourke's vitals were faint, barely traceable, but there. Blood pressure 60-40, pulse thready, respiration shallow. And yet, somehow impossibly, the man everyone thought was dead was clinging to life. And the only reason they knew was Bruno. By 2:15 p.m., Colonel Rourke was stabilized and en route to Boston Memorial. Captain Maddox gone. No goodbyes, no statements, no explanation. Cole stood at the cathedral's side entrance, watching the rain drizzle down the ambulance windows. Bruno sat at his side, damp fur soaked through, still panting heavily. Cole looked down. You knew, didn't you? Bruno gave a quiet whine, pressed his head against Cole's leg. And for the first time in hours, Cole smiled. Good dog, Boston Memorial Hospital wasn't built for miracles. Like most hospitals, it was built for facts, for numbers, heart rates, oxygen levels, blood work. It was built to comfort the grieving, to stabilize the broken, and when possible to fix what could be fixed. But it wasn't built for what happened that Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't built for a dead man breathing again. By the time the ambulance arrived, word had already started to spread. Colonel Matthew Rourke, presumed dead from a sudden heart attack just 48 hours earlier, was alive. Barely. Faint pulse, weak respiration, but alive. Elaine Rourke paced the hallway outside the ICU, still dressed in her navy blue funeral attire, her eyes hollow and shell-shocked. She clutched the folded flag they had just hours ago draped over her husband's coffin. At her feet lay Bruno, stretched out on the hospital floor, his head resting between his paws. His ears twitched every few seconds, still on high alert. Cole Jennings sat nearby, his phone buzzing with missed calls and texts, all unanswered. I should have known, Elaine whispered, suddenly breaking the silence. I should have listened to him. Cole looked up. Matthew. He kept saying things felt wrong, she said. The last 2 weeks he wouldn't leave the house without checking the locks 3 times. He made me move the Wi-Fi router into the bedroom. Said he was being watched. Cole nodded slowly. He said something similar to me last week. Told me if anything happened, not to believe the first answer I was given. Elaine turned her gaze toward the ICU doors. They said it was his heart. Yeah, Cole muttered. But the heart doesn't stop like that unless something makes it stop. Inside the room, the colonel lay unconscious. His vitals were fragile but holding. A steady pulse, monitors beeping in rhythm, oxygen hissing softly through nasal tubing. And on the windowsill, the hospital staff had placed a handwritten sign. Patient was declared deceased. Recovered signs of life during funeral. Under observation. Our Meredith Hayes, the attending neurologist, met Cole in the hallway. She was mid-40s, composed but tired, the kind of tired you only earn by seeing too much too often. I've reviewed the chart, she said without preamble. We're calling it an extreme case of apparent death, a very rare combination of symptoms that mimic death, ultra-low heart rate, suppressed brain activity, shallow breathing. It can fool medical equipment if you're not looking for it. Cole frowned. That's comforting. It shouldn't be, Dr. Hayes replied. Because here's the thing, this doesn't happen spontaneously. This kind of suppression, it's almost always drug-induced. Elaine inhaled sharply. Are you saying someone poisoned him? I'm not saying that definitively, the doctor said carefully. But we're running a full tox screen now. We should have preliminary results within 24 hours. Cole walked back to the waiting room, his mind spinning. The colonel was targeted. But why? And who would go through the trouble of making him appear dead rather than just finishing the job? His thoughts were interrupted by a low growl. Bruno had risen from the floor, tail stiff, ears forwards. He was staring down the hallway toward the elevators. What is it, buddy? Cole asked. That's when the elevator dinged. And out stepped Captain Frank Maddox. The man was all charm. Pressed suit, perfectly knotted tie, the picture of composure, like he was walking into a retirement party instead of a post-mortem miracle. Well, he said, offering a strange smile, I heard the rumors, but I had to see for myself. A resurrection, huh? Elaine's posture stiffened. Bruno began to growl again, louder this time. Cole stepped between them. What are you doing here, Captain? I'm still his commanding officer, Detective Maddox replied smoothly. And his friend thought I'd check in. Cole didn't move. We've got it covered. Maddox's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Relax, Jennings. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want answers like everyone else. Bruno took a step forward, placing himself directly in front of Cole and Elaine. His body was rigid now, defensive. I'll say this much, Maddox added, glancing down at the dog. That mutt's got a flair for the dramatic. He saved his life, Elaine said quietly. And you're not calling him that again. Maddox lifted his hands in mock surrender. Noted. He turned and began walking away, but not before Cole caught it. The glance, a flicker of hesitation as Maddox looked back toward the ICU doors. Not fear, not grief. Calculation. Later that evening, Dr. Hayes returned. I have your preliminary tox screen, she said, holding a tablet in one hand. Colonel Rourke had high levels of tetrodotoxin in his system. Cole blinked. Tetro? What? It's a powerful neurotoxin found in certain marine animals. Pufferfish mostly. It slows everything: heart rate, respiration, neural activity. In large doses, it can cause a person to appear clinically dead. Elaine gasped. You're saying someone poisoned him with that? I'm saying, Dr. Hayes said carefully, it's not something you'd ingest by accident. Someone gave it to him, yes. How? She tapped the screen. Most likely through tampered medication. We found trace residue in the binding agents that match prescription pill coatings. Cole's jaw clenched. The colonel had been taking blood pressure meds for years. Whoever had access to that bottle, they weren't trying to kill him. They were trying to buy time, to erase something before anyone started looking. That night, Cole drove Bruno to the Rourke home in Brookline. The rain had stopped, but the streets still gleamed with the remnants of it, reflections of street lights stretching across wet pavement like ghosts. The house was still, too still. Cole unlocked the front door using the key the colonel had given him long ago. Just in case, Rourke had said. Inside, everything was untouched, tidy, but sterile in a way that didn't feel right. Bruno sniffed around, moving from room to room with quiet urgency. He stopped suddenly in the study and began pawing at the edge of the bookshelf. What is it, boy? Behind a stack of old books, Cole found it. A flash drive, taped to the inside panel of the shelf. He stared at it, then slowly peeled it free. There was a note folded beneath it, in Rourke's handwriting. If you're reading this, it means I was right. They're inside. Trust no one but Cole. Cole's heart slammed against his chest. He pocketed the drive and looked at Bruno. Let's get to work. The drive was encrypted, password protected with a question prompt. Our first vacation spot. Cole stared at the screen trying to remember. Then it hit him. A photo on the colonel's desk. Maine, the lake house. He typed Kennebunkport. The drive unlocked. Inside were dozens of documents, wire transfers, names, case numbers, hidden audio files. And a pattern began to emerge, one that made Cole's blood run cold. Colonel Rourke hadn't just been building a case against the Delgado cartel. He was building one against his own department. A network of corrupt officers helping to launder cartel money, manipulating case files, feeding intel to the enemy. And one name kept appearing over and over. Captain Frank Maddox. Back at the hospital, Elaine was just settling in to sleep in a small chair by the ICU room when her phone buzzed. A message from Cole. The colonel was right. The flash drive proves it. Maddox is dirty. Her fingers trembled. Her throat went dry. She looked at Matthew, still unconscious but alive, still fighting, because of Bruno. And outside in the hospital parking lot, a dark sedan idled with its headlights off. Inside, a man in a press suit scrolled through recent call logs. His eyes locked onto one number. Then he dialed. It's me, he said. He's not dead. The hallway outside ICU room 9 was quiet again. Too quiet. Elaine Rourke stood by the window, arms folded tightly across her chest, staring through the glass at her husband. Colonel Matthew Rourke lay motionless beneath a thin hospital blanket, his chest rising slowly artificially with the help of oxygen. He looked better, color returning, monitors steady, but he hadn't opened his eyes since the ambulance ride. Bruno hadn't left his side. The old German shepherd was curled up near the bed nose, resting against the mattress, one paw gently touching the corner of the colonel's blanket like a lifeline. The nurse on duty had made a comment earlier that the dog hadn't even barked once since they brought Rourke back. Just watched, listened, waited. He's guarding, Elaine had said. He's waiting for something to come back, or maybe something to come again. Downstairs in the parking lot, Cole Jennings leaned against his unmarked police cruiser, staring at the flash drive's contents on his department-issued laptop. The deeper he dug, the worse it got. Money transfers from cartel fronts routed to offshore accounts. Case files marked as closed when they had never been opened. Informants who went missing days after reporting to certain officers. But the worst part, names. Names of people he'd known for years. Officers he'd trained with, shared coffee with. And at the center of it all, Captain Frank Maddox. Cole scrolled through the last folder on the Drive Falcon. Most of it was coded communication. Meeting times, location names. But there was a pattern. One message repeated in various ways across multiple entries. Falcon is compromised. Timeline must be moved up. Someone on the inside had figured out that Falcon, whoever they were, was feeding Rourke information. And Rourke must have known he was a target. The poisoning wasn't just a coincidence. It was a hit. Cole slammed the laptop shut and climbed into the cruiser. His next stop wasn't the precinct, not yet. He had someone else to visit. The door to Internal Affairs Detective Sarah Barnes's office was slightly ajar when he arrived. She looked up as he stepped in, her silver hair pulled back into a low bun, eyes sharp behind black-rimmed glasses. She didn't offer pleasantries. Barnes never did. "You came," she said. "That already makes you smarter than half the guys on your squad." Cole dropped the flash drive on her desk. Colonel Rourke gave it to his wife before he collapsed. Told her it was his insurance. Barnes raised an eyebrow, so he knew someone was coming for him. He didn't know who exactly, but he had a feeling. He was building a case. Not just against the Delgado cartel, against our own. She plugged in the drive, opened the files, and started scanning through the folders. Her jaw clenched. Jesus Christ. "Yeah, this is enough to get the feds involved." "I was hoping you'd say that." She nodded. "I'll reach out to the Organized Crime Task Force. We need to move fast. If Maddox knows Rourke's alive, he's not going to wait around." Cole hesitated. "There's something else. An officer on patrol told me he saw Maddox meeting with a Delgado lieutenant down by the docks 3 nights ago." "Did he report it?" "To you." "Who?" "Ray Morales." Barnes frowned. "I never got a report." Cole's stomach dropped. "He told me he filed it. Then someone intercepted it," she said, already pulling up the internal system, "and deleted the record." Cole's voice was low. "Ray's missing. Didn't show up for his shift last night." Barnes stood up. "You think they silenced him?" "I think someone's cleaning house." Back at the hospital, Elaine finally allowed herself a moment to sit. The weight of it all had begun to settle, not just her husband's near death, but the shadows moving around them. Whispers of betrayal, questions without answers. She sat beside the hospital bed, her hand gently stroking Bruno's back. The old dog didn't flinch, but he did open his eyes just for a moment and looked directly at the door. Elaine turned just as someone knocked. It was a nurse, young, nervous, not one Elaine recognized. "Mrs. Rourke," the woman asked. "I'm here to take Colonel Rourke for additional testing." Elaine stood. "That wasn't scheduled." "Oh, it was added last minute. Doctor's orders." "Which doctor?" Dr. Hayes, I believe." Elaine narrowed her eyes. "She always calls me first." "I'm just following the chart." Bruno stood now, stiff-legged, growling. Elaine reached slowly for the phone. "I'll confirm with the ICU desk." The nurse flinched and ran. Elaine screamed. Bruno charged. The hallway lit up with commotion. A security guard tackled the woman before she could reach the elevator. By the time Cole arrived 15 minutes later, she was already in custody. Her badge fake, her ID forged, her real name unknown. That night, Cole sat in a quiet consultation room in the hospital, staring at the flash drive's final audio file. It was a voice memo from Rourke himself. The last entry dated just 2 days before the poisoning. "Maddox suspects Falcon. Meeting moved to Tuesday. I've warned Cole. If something happens to me, the drive goes to IA and the feds. This goes deeper than we thought. There's a second cell inside the department. Not just Boston PD. Maybe City Hall. If I disappear, don't believe it. Don't bury me." Cole leaned back in his chair, the weight of the colonel's words settling over him like wet cement. Falcon was in danger. Rourke had said the timeline was moved up. That meant someone else could be next. And then he remembered. In one of the earlier entries, a name had been partially redacted. Monsieur Delgado. Delgado, as in Raul Delgado, leader of the cartel. Which meant, Maria Cole whispered. At 1:17 a.m., Bruno began to bark. Not a panic bark. An alert. Cole sat upright in the waiting room, instantly awake. Bruno was standing in the ICU hallway, ears up, tail low, body still. Elaine stepped out of room 9 just as Cole reached the corner. She looked at Bruno, then at Cole. He knows something's coming, she said. Cole nodded. So do I. Across town in a dark basement beneath a warehouse owned by a Delgado shell company, a woman sat tied to a chair. Her face was bruised, one eye nearly swollen shut. But her voice was clear. I already told you. If he's still alive, it's too late. You waited too long. The man standing across from her didn't speak. He just walked out of the room and picked up a phone. Plan B, he said. We hit the hospital. Back in Boston Memorial, Cole checked his weapon, then looked down at Bruno, who was watching him intently. You're ready, partner. The dog gave one soft bark. Outside in the early hours of dawn, the city began to stir. But inside the hospital where the truth slept in a bed surrounded by lies, one thing was clear. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Hospitals have a certain rhythm after dark. The buzz of fluorescent lights, the slow shuffle of nurses on rounds, the soft hum of ventilators. Even grief seems to speak more quietly after midnight. But something felt off that night. Too still, too silent. Bruno felt it first. It started as a twitch in his ears, subtle but unmistakable. A change in pressure, a vibration in the floor no human could detect. The kind of thing a combat-trained canine never forgets. He rose slowly from his spot near Colonel Matthew Rourke's bed, muscles taut, eyes locked on the hallway. Cole Jennings looked up from his chair beside the door. The dog didn't bark, didn't growl. He just stared. What is it, boy? Cole asked, already reaching for his holstered Glock. Bruno stepped toward the hallway. That's when the first light flickered, and then everything went dark. It wasn't a power outage. The emergency lights stayed on. The machines didn't cut off, but the security cameras went black. At the nurse's station, a young intern named Pete tapped his monitor, confused. I think we've lost the feed, he said to the night nurse. She frowned. That's not supposed to happen. Call security. Pete picked up the phone, but the line was dead. At the same moment in the east stairwell, two men in janitor uniforms removed bolt cutters from a mop cart and clipped the security latch on a fire door. No badges, no hospital IDs, just gloves, guns, and a plan. Elaine Rourke was in the consultation room down the hall on the phone with her sister. Her voice was calm but tight with nerves. No, we're still here. He hasn't woken up yet, but he's breathing stronger. The doctors are hopeful. She paused, listening. Bruno's still watching him. He hasn't moved all night. She stopped. The overhead lights blinked. Once, twice, then dimmed to half power. Hang on, she said. Something's happening. Before she could finish the sentence, Bruno let out a sharp guttural bark, one she hadn't heard since he was an active-duty canine. Cole was already moving. He stepped into the hall, gun-drawn eyes scanning the dim corridor. Bruno took the lead, low and steady like a shadow with teeth. They passed the nurse's station just as a loud crash echoed from the west end of the ICU. Then footsteps. Fast, heavy. Cole turned. Elaine, get down. Lock yourself in. She didn't argue. As she slammed the consultation room door shut, Bruno lunged forward, barking now, fierce and focused. Two men rounded the far corner of the hall, both dressed in dark tactical gear, faces covered. One carried a suppressed weapon. The other had a syringe. Cole didn't hesitate. Police, drop it now. The man with the gun raised his weapon. Bruno was faster. He leapt. Teeth sank into the man's forearm, wrenching the weapon sideways as the shot went wild, punching into a wall-mounted defibrillator and sending sparks flying. Cole took aim and fired. The second man dropped. The first struggled beneath Bruno, trying to shake the dog loose. You're done, Cole growled, closing the distance. He kicked the assailant's wrists, sending the pistol clattering across the tiles, then cuffed him with practiced ease. Bruno finally released his grip, chest heaving, blood on his muzzle. Not his own. Security arrived seconds later, but Cole waved them off. This isn't over. They weren't alone. I've got a call into Boston PD. One of the guards said, radioing frantically. Backup's coming. Cole turned to Bruno. Let's find the rest. They moved quickly, clearing side rooms, bathrooms, storage closets. It wasn't until they reached the elevator lobby that they saw it. A third man standing over a nurse. She was unconscious but breathing. A syringe lay nearby. Bruno growled loud and deep. The man turned, and for a split second he froze. Not at Cole, at the dog. Then he ran. The chase through the hospital corridors was short but brutal. Cole gave pursuit, calling out warnings. Police stop. The man shoved a crash cart into Cole's path and darted down a stairwell. Bruno followed like a missile body, low to the ground legs, moving with a speed that belied his age. Down 2 flights, through the basement corridor, finally into the laundry room. The man turned gun in hand. Bruno didn't stop. The shot fired, but Bruno was already midair. He hit the man square in the chest, knocking him backward into a stack of laundry carts. Cole entered moments later, panting. The man was down, bleeding from the shoulder. Bruno stood over him, unmoving. They cuffed him, found a burner phone in his pocket. When it buzzed moments later, Cole glanced at the screen. The contact read FM, Frank Maddox. An hour later, Cole sat beside Elaine in the colonel's hospital room, the door now guarded by two armed FBI agents. The flash drive was in Barnes' hands. The three men were in custody. And Bruno, curled up again by Rourke's bed, eyes closed, breathing calm. "You okay?" Cole asked. Elaine nodded. "Bruno saved his life again tonight." "Twice in 1 week," Cole said. "He's showing off." She smiled, but her expression faded quickly. "Why would they risk something so bold in a hospital?" Cole's voice dropped. "Because they knew the drive existed, and they knew he might wake up. They didn't come to finish the job," she whispered. "They came to keep him quiet." At 3:32 a.m., the hospital room monitor beeped. Not an alarm, a change. The colonel's fingers twitched. Bruno raised his head. Elaine leaned in. "Matthew?" Rourke's eyelids fluttered, then opened. He blinked, struggling to focus, then turned slowly toward Bruno and smiled. His lips cracked dry from dehydration. But he managed to whisper, "Good boy." Dr. Hayes arrived 10 minutes later, eyes wide with disbelief. "I didn't expect to see this for days," she admitted. "He's responding earlier than we hoped." Rourke reached out, handshaking, and took Elaine's. His voice was gravel, barely there. "Falcon, she's safe," Cole said. "We've got her under protection." "We know about Maddox." Rourke nodded weakly. "There's more inside." "We found the drive," Cole said. "And the guys you trained with, the ones you trusted." "We got 'em," Rourke sighed. Not relief, just exhaustion. He looked at Bruno again, eyes glassy with emotion. "I heard him," he whispered. "Even when I couldn't move, I heard him." Outside the room, Cole met Barnes in the hallway. She held up a file. "This is the hit team's roster. We've ID'd all three. 2 ex-military, 1 former private contractor. Professionals." "Exactly. And guess what?" "Let me guess," Cole said. "They've all worked security contracts for Maddox's private foundation." "Bingo." Barnes stepped closer. "We've got enough to issue a warrant. Maddox is done." Cole looked past her toward the hospital room where Bruno had returned to his post, lying protectively at the colonel's side. "I'm not sure I ever believed in guardian angels," he said quietly. "But that dog?" Barnes nodded. "We'll need him in court." Cole laughed under his breath. "He'll wear a tie." The sun was rising as Maddox's name was finally entered into the national database as a person of interest. And across Boston walls were beginning to crumble. As Cole drove home for a quick shower and a change of clothes, Bruno rode shotgun, his head out the window, ears flapping in the breeze. Cole glanced over. "You're something else, buddy." Bruno didn't bark. He didn't need to. He'd said enough. The story had already leaked by morning. Boston PD was on fire internally and publicly. The news didn't have every detail, not yet. But the headlines were damning enough. Colonel Matthew Rourke alive after declared dead. Canine dog uncovers attempted assassination. Hero dog foils attack at hospital police corruption probe widens. Questions mount as high-ranking officers fall under investigation. It was the kind of scandal that didn't just rock a city, it rattled trust. And right in the middle of it all, without knowing or caring about the headlines, one dog sat patiently in a hospital room, his eyes fixed on the man he refused to leave behind. Bruno hadn't slept more than a few minutes at a time in 3 days. He stayed close, always between the colonel and the door, ears alert, muscles tense, as if part of him still believed the danger hadn't passed. And maybe he was right. Cole Jennings hadn't slept either. He was in a side room with FBI agent Morales, Detective Barnes, and a federal prosecutor from the Organized Crime Division. On the table in front of them were 3 things: the decrypted contents of Rourke's flash drive, surveillance photos of Captain Frank Maddox meeting with known cartel affiliates, a warrant signed, sealed, and ready for execution. "The only problem now," Morales said, "is we don't know where Maddox is." "He's not at his house," Barnes added, "and he hasn't used his department-issued phone in 48 hours. Cole rubbed his temples. "That means he's scared, desperate, or both." "And desperate men," said Morales, "are unpredictable." By mid-morning, a convoy of agents headed to Maddox's last known safe house, a cabin an hour outside the city. But Cole had a gut feeling. "He's not running," he said aloud to himself in the hallway. "He's not built that way." He looked at his phone and scrolled to an old photo, a snapshot from 5 years ago, Rourke, Maddox, and Cole at a retirement party for one of the sergeants. 3 men smiling. 3 men who'd once trusted each other with their lives. And only one of them still had anything to lose. In the hospital, Rourke was speaking again. His voice was hoarse and weak, but his mind was sharp, sharper than any of them expected. "He knows I'm awake now," he said quietly to Elaine and Cole, "which means it's only a matter of time before he does something irreversible." Elaine tightened her grip on his hand. "You need to rest." "I've been resting," Rourke said with a dry smile. while someone tried to bury me. Bruno lifted his head and gently placed a paw on the edge of the bed. He knows, the colonel said. He's always known. Cole leaned in. We've got the evidence. We've got the warrant. All we need is the right moment. Rourke nodded slowly. Then use me as bait. Elaine sat up straighter. Absolutely not. It's the only way, Rourke said. He's not going to let me live to testify. The hospital went into partial lockdown under the FBI's direction. Only cleared personnel could enter the ICU floor. 2 agents outside every access point. Cole stayed close to Rourke while Bruno remained the silent sentry he'd always been. By 4:45 p.m., Maddox was still missing. And that's when the black SUV pulled into the staff parking garage beneath the hospital. It had government plates. Security waved it through. They didn't notice the driver's face because he never looked up. And by the time they did, the man in the black tactical jacket was already out of sight. Cole was the first to sense something. He felt it in the air. A shift. That faint chill up your spine that cops get when something's about to go sideways. He turned to Bruno. The dog was already up, ears sharp, tail still. Let's go, Cole said, grabbing his sidearm. They caught the first signal on a secondary hallway security cam, a man moving fast, blending in too well, carrying what looked like a laptop bag. Facial match confirmed Captain Frank Maddox. He was headed toward ICU. He had a suppressed pistol and something else in the bag. Barnes called for full lockdown. Cole and Bruno took the service corridor, moving fast and low. Where would he go first? Barnes radioed. He's not going to Rourke's room first, Cole replied, sprinting. He'll hit the nurse's station, steal a badge, maybe knock out communications. But what's in the bag? Cole didn't answer. He had a pretty good idea. Maddox made it to the nurse's station in less than a minute. The night shift nurse stood frozen as he pulled out a pistol in a small black device. This connects to the building's Wi-Fi, he said calmly. It'll take about 2 minutes. Then I erase every patient record, every file, every scan. Gone. You won't get away with this, she whispered. I'm not planning to, Maddox said. But I'm not going down for him either. And then, drop it. Cole's voice, clear and steady, echoed down the corridor. Maddox turned, startled. Bruno was already moving. The next few seconds unfolded like a war zone. Cole fired first a warning shot into the wall. Maddox ducked, returned fire, and took off running. Cole shouted, Bruno, take him. The German Shepherd launched down the hallway, a flash of brown and black fur. Maddox tried to swing the pistol toward him, but it was too late. Bruno hit him mid-stride, knocking him against a wall. The pistol clattered to the floor. Bruno didn't bite. He pinned. The perfect hold teeth exposed but not breaking skin, snarling right into Maddox's face. Cole arrived seconds later, gun trained on the suspect. Hands where I can see them. Maddox raised his hand slowly. Blood trickled from his mouth, not from Bruno, but from biting his own lip in frustration. It's over, Cole said. No, Maddox replied, bitter. It was over the moment that dog refused to walk away. 2 hours later, Maddox was booked into federal custody. The bag contained not just a weapon, but a kill switch for several encrypted drives designed to wipe sensitive data from cartel servers if Rourke ever testified. Evidence was intact. The kill switch had never been activated. All because of Bruno. The hospital room was quiet again. Colonel Rourke sat up with help from Elaine, sipping water through a straw. The swelling around his eyes had gone down. He was tired, but awake. And safe. He's going to prison, isn't he? He asked. Federal charges, conspiracy, attempted murder, racketeering, you name it, Cole replied. Rourke nodded, then looked at Bruno. He should get a medal. He will, Cole said, smiling, and probably his own press conference. But Bruno didn't care about any of that. As the sun set over the city, casting a warm amber glow through the hospital window, he curled up at the foot of Rourke's bed, not to protect, not to guard, just to rest. Because his mission was finally complete. For now. 6 weeks later, the Boston Police Headquarters auditorium was standing room only. Rows of chairs filled the space, each packed with uniformed officers, federal agents, city officials, and family members, all gathered beneath the soft blue light that filtered in through high-arched windows. At the front of the stage stood a wooden podium flanked by the American flag, the department crest, and a hand-polished oak table bearing a single-frame certificate and a velvet-lined metal box. In the front row sat Colonel Matthew Rourke, dressed in full uniform, thinner than before, still walking with a cane but very much alive. Beside him, as always, sat Elaine, her hand resting gently on his knee. And stretched at their feet, eyes scanning the room, lay Bruno, the aging German shepherd who had refused to give up when the world told him it was over. Ladies and gentlemen, the commissioner began stepping up to the mic. We're here today not just to honor one of the finest officers this city has ever known, but also to recognize a bond most of us could only hope to understand. He looked down at Bruno. Today, we honor a hero with 4 legs, a veteran of more than 100 operations, a dog who took a bullet in the line of duty, who gave everything for his partner even after retirement, even when the rest of us were ready to lower the casket lid. A wave of emotion rippled through the crowd. He didn't stop. He didn't run. He stood his ground, and because of that, justice was served, a man's life was saved, and corruption was exposed. The commissioner paused, lifting the small blue metal box. This is the highest non-human honor the Boston Police Department has ever given. A medal of exceptional bravery, of undying loyalty, of service beyond duty. He turned to the colonel. Colonel Rourke, if you're ready. The auditorium fell into complete silence. Rourke stood slowly leaning on his cane. Elaine helped him to the podium where the commissioner carefully handed him the medal. Bruno sat up, tail still eyes on his old partner. Rourke knelt, one hand on Bruno's collar, the other holding the award. Bruno, he said, voice low but strong, you saved my life, not once, not twice, but every single day you stood by me. You gave me purpose. You gave me family. He slipped the ribbon gently around the dog's neck. You gave me hope. A beat, then applause, thunderous rising to a standing ovation as every officer in the room came to their feet. Bruno blinked up at Rourke, tongue slipping out and a sheepish pant tail thumping softly on the floor. He didn't understand the applause, but he understood the man in front of him. And that was enough. After the ceremony, reporters swarmed for interviews, but Rourke and Cole slipped out early, walking Bruno across the plaza behind the building, letting the old dog stretch his legs in the cool fall air. The leaves had started to change, gold, crimson, rust orange. The city smelled of cider stands and morning frost. Looks like retirement's gonna stick this time, Cole said, patting Rourke on the back. The colonel smirked. I'll believe it when you stop calling me sir. They sat on a bench beneath a maple tree while Bruno nosed through a patch of leaves. Cole looked over. You really didn't hear anything while you were under, I heard him, Rourke said quietly. His barking, his breathing, his paws scratching. It kept me tethered. Cole nodded silent for a long moment. I used to think loyalty was something that faded, he said. Something we lost along the way. But that dog, he never wavered. Rourke smiled because he doesn't know how. Across the city, headlines continued to unfold. Captain Frank Maddox was in federal custody awaiting trial. The FBI had uncovered deep ties between him and multiple figures in the Delgado cartel, including financial records, recorded phone calls, and thanks to Bruno's interception, physical evidence that tied him to a failed attempt to permanently silence Rourke. 7 other officers had either resigned or been placed under investigation. One turned state's witness, and Falcon finally revealed to be Maria Delgado, sister of cartel leader Raul Delgado, had entered witness protection. Her testimony was scheduled for the fall. Thanks to her courage and Rourke's files, the cartel's East Coast operations had collapsed. The system wasn't perfect, but it was healing. The following weekend, Rourke, Elaine, and Bruno packed their bags and headed north to Maine. A quiet cabin near Kennebunkport. No sirens, no city noise. Just trees, water, and peace. Bruno adjusted quickly. He slept longer, snored louder, chased ducks slowly, and spent every morning laying on the porch watching the lake like it owed him answers. Elaine laughed more. The color returned to her cheeks. And Rourke, he was content. Healing wasn't linear, but it was happening. One morning, Cole came to visit. He brought coffee, a newspaper, and a leather collar wrapped in a velvet pouch. What's this, Rourke asked. Retirement gift, Cole said. Rourke opened it. The collar was engraved in silver lettering. Bruno, Boston Police K-9 Unit. He heard the truth when no one else would. The colonel's voice caught. He deserves more than I ever could give him. He doesn't need more, Cole replied. You already gave him everything. They sat in silence, the lake shimmering in the morning sun. Bruno rolled onto his back and the grass legs twitching in sleep. Later that night after dinner, Rourke stood on the porch while Elaine brought out a blanket. The air was crisp, quiet, peaceful. Do you think people will remember all this? She asked. I think they'll remember him, Rourke said, nodding toward the dog lying nearby. She smiled. They should. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders. In a world where it's hard to know who to trust, he reminded us what loyalty really looks like. As the stars came out over the lake, Bruno let out a low, satisfied sigh and curled up at Rourke's feet. The wind rustled the leaves overhead. Nothing more needed to be said. They had lived through betrayal, near death, and deep corruption. And they had come out the other side, not perfect, not untouched, but together. alive, free, and whole. Thank you for following Bruno's incredible story, a journey of courage, loyalty, and the powerful bond between a man and his dog. Bruno reminded us that sometimes, even when everyone else gives up, one heart refuses to let go. One bark can change everything. What would you do if your dog tried to tell you something no one else believed? Let us know in the comments, and if Bruno's story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more true tales of extraordinary animals.